Coming to paperback and e-readers, the steam season of The Witch Girl. The aspiring angel takes on a wicked teenage witch in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Pre-order your copy of Esteem Season of The Witch Girl at Amazon.com and other online booksellers. Historical couples in crisis. One of my viewers wanted me to do another installment in the Historical Couples in Crisis series. And for this installment in the Historical Couples in Crisis series, I'm going to be talking about three members of a love triangle that went deadly, a married couple, Robert and Kandi Hall, and the attorney who wound up becoming a victim of murder, Emmett Corgan. The first person I'm going to be talking about in this tragic love triangle of this historical couple in crisis is Emmett Corgan. Now, Emmett Corgan was an attorney who was married to his college sweetheart, and as he was married to his college sweetheart, Ashley, he had established a thriving law firm, and as he was establishing that thriving law firm, he went out and had 5 children with his very attractive young wife, Ashley. Unfortunately, that was not enough to satisfy him, and as his business was expanding, he hired Kandi Hall, a 40-year-old woman, to be his paralegal or legal secretary, and as he got involved with Kandi at the office, he began having an affair that sadly would wind up leading to him losing his life on March 11, 2011, when he was confronted by Kandi Hall's husband, Robert Hall, in the parking lot of a Walgreens. And when it came down to Emmett Corrigan, he was a man in crisis, like I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis, and he was also a simp, like I talk about in my book, Stop Simping, Why Men Don't Need Finance to Get Romance. And what led to Emmett Corgan basically winding up in this whole tragic situation was the fact that he just was a very young man at 28 years old and had not really grown out of his simp phase. And since he hadn't grown out of his simp phase because he did not have much experience with women, because he was married to his college sweetheart who he had only known for 3 months, and without that experience as related to being able to deal with women, he really could not really observe and identify the behavior of a female predator. And that's what really, put Emmett Corrigan on the road to being a man in crisis. The fact that he just did not have enough seasoning in life to be able to identify a female predator in this woman, Kandi Hall, because Kandi Hall basically was one of these women, one of these female predators who was looking to prey on Emmett Corrigan, and she was looking to prey on Emmett Corrigan because she had a lot of insecurities because her husband, Robert Hall, had an affair with another woman, and she was feeling insecure and inadequate, and she was, again, not really feeling too good about her abilities on the job. However, when she went to work for Emmett Corrigan, she basically saw this young, attractive man who had success, and this is what triggered her natural hypergamy. And as her natural hypergamy was triggered, this is where she saw an opportunity not to go out here and prey on Emmett Corrigan by looking to go out here and foster a codependent relationship with him, where she would be the mother figure and she would be the one who would have the power in the relationship. And as she would be the one who would have the power in the relationship, she offered Emmett Corrigan sexual access to her body and began to have an affair with Emmett Corrigan, where she would be the one who would have all the power in the relationship. And as she would have that power, she would be able to reclaim that whole sense of self-confidence and self-worth that she had in the relationship. But sadly, Emmett Corrigan couldn't see this whole picture. He couldn't see this picture as related to Kandi Hall's behavior, as related to this case, because he was a very young, naive guy. And as he was a young, naive guy, he was caught up in his feelings about this older woman paying him attention. He was caught up in his feelings about this older woman, again, looking to, again, see him as attractive, and he was caught up in ideas that he had possibly seen in mainstream media, such as these MILF movies like American Pie and many other teen movies that featured older women going after younger men, which was a trend in the 1990s and 2000s. And possibly this was one of those things that motivated him to pursue this relationship with this woman, who was an older woman to two teenage daughters, and looked to have this relationship with this woman, thinking that he had basically scored as related to, again, this older woman paying attention to him and her being, again, more sexually experienced, and with her being more sexually experienced and possibly offering him more sexual access and more attention than his wife. Now, his wife was already caring for 5 children, and this is possibly one of the reasons why he went after Kandi Hall. Went after Kandi Hall because he was working with Kandi all the time, and possibly, again, looking to have a little something on the side, because when it comes down to simps, when they love getting in deals like this, not seeing that they are raw deals. And sadly, what happened here to Emmett Corgan is he thought he could get involved with Kandi Hall, have a little on the side, and that's what he was doing when he met in the Walgreens parking lot, parking his vehicle next to her vehicle, and then they went to a secluded area inside of a home that was being built and had sexual relations. However, Kandi's daughter basically came to that Walgreens parking lot, saw her mother's vehicle, and contacted her father. And on the father being contacted, and the father was basically, again, another simp, because he thought he could possess this woman. And as the daughter contacted the father, this is where he drove down to the Walgreens. And as he drove down to the Walgreens parking lot, this is where Emmett Corgan wound up in a confrontation with Robert Hall. And as he wound up in that confrontation with Robert Hall, sadly, this was going to be his last day on this world after having that sexual relationship with Kandi Hall, where he basically wound up smashing Kandi Hall before he came back to that Walgreens parking lot. And this is where they wound up having a confrontation where Robert Hall took out a firearm, fired 2 shots into Emmett Corgan, taking his life, and then he wound up, after shooting him, then tried to shoot himself and make it look like it was a murder-suicide. However, unfortunately, the bullet did not take the life of Robert Hall, and he went out and wound up with a graze wound to his head and possible alleged amnesia. But sadly, in the case of Emmett Corgan, sadly, this up-and-coming eternity wound up tragically losing his life, as a man, and lost his life primarily because he didn't have a good understanding of how to be able to deal with women on the job professionally and know how to maintain his professional distance. This is something I go in depth on in my book, Stop Simping in the Workplace, because many males, again, when they are workplace simps, they don't really understand that you have to establish boundaries at the job. Even when you're a business owner, you have to establish a boundary at the job as related to making sure that women on your job are off limits, and women are off limits on the job because a relationship with one of your coworkers can jam you up not only professionally, but if you get too personal with a married woman, what can happen is that the husband can find out, and you could be in a situation like Emmett Corgan where your life is in danger. And that's because oftentimes when these women, again, are looking to prey on a man, they have a man in their life, they're dealing with a guy with a lot of emotions out here as related to him. And that's what Emmett Corgan didn't really understand, because he was a very, again, young guy with a very little seasoning as related to life, very little seasoning as related to how relationships work, and very little seasoning as related to how the world works, because any critical thinking man would know not to get involved with a married woman not to get involved with a married woman, because usually married women have issues, and if she's again someone who will cheat with you, she will cheat on you. And if she will cheat with you, she's basically a ratchet chick. And when it came down to Kandi Hall, she was an extremely ratchet chick who basically put Emmett Corrigan in a situation, partially because he was one of these simps who again put himself in a situation where he went from being a man with great success to winding up being a man in crisis. Now, the second person I'm going to be talking about in this love triangle, in this historical couple in crisis, is Kandi Hall. Now, Kandi Hall was the center of this love triangle between Emmett Corrigan and Robert Hall, and she was the one who basically instigated this entire situation that led to the death of Emmett Corrigan. Now, Kandi Hall basically was one of these feminist indoctrinated women, like I talk about in my book, The Woman Crisis, and was a woman who basically fits the chapters that I talk about, such as crime and the woman crisis, because Kandi Hall was participating in a series of antisocial behaviors due to the affair that her husband, Robert Hall, wound up having on her. Now, this affair that Robert Hall had on Kandi Hall caused Kandi Hall to have serious bruises to her ego, and as she had these bruises to her ego, she began to participate in antisocial behaviors because of a way to deal with her feelings regarding that whole affair, and part of that was her participating in embezzlement at the previous law firm where she worked, and the people at that law firm didn't know she was doing this until later on. However, after she basically made a mess of her life with that job at the law firm, this is where she was looking to move to another law firm, and she found a perfect person to prey on in Emmett Corgan, because as she took a job with Emmett Corgan, she was not looking to be a consummate professional. No, she was looking to go out here and take advantage of Emmett Corgan because he was a young, naive simp, and he was a young, naive simp who, yes, he had lots of book smarts as related to the law, but he did not have good people skills, and because he did not have very good people skills and could not read people, what happened is he wound up being preyed on by a female predator. Now, Emmett Corrigan basically was a guy who didn't really have much experience with women because he got married to his college sweetheart, Ashley, after only being involved with her for 3 months in a relationship, and with him being a Mormon man who was dedicated to his religion, he did not have that seasoning in male life skills or male survival skills in order to identify a woman who had a pattern of antisocial behavior. And because he could not identify that pattern of behavior, what happened with Emmett Corgan is he wound up getting involved with Kandi Hall, who looked to foster a motherly relationship that she hoped to attach an emotional hose to be able to manipulate and control him. Because when it came down to Kandi Hall, she was feeling inadequate about her relationship with Robert Hall because of the affair that she had, and because she had not processed the trauma of that affair, she was getting involved with Emmett Corgan, hoping to gain power over him, as related to fostering a codependent relationship with Emmett Corrigan, where she would be the one who would be the dominant one in the relationship, and he would be the submissive, because in her mind, she had submitted to Robert Hall, and he had broken that trust. And because she did not want to be hurt again, what she hoped to do with the next man she had a relationship with was be the one who would have all the power. And as she would be the one who would have all the power in the relationship, she would be the one controlling the relationship in this whole situation of this codependency that she had as a mother figure. And again, Emmett basically was possibly one of these males who had not had his emotional needs met by his mother and could not get his needs met by his wife, Ashley, because she was trying to meet the needs of 5 children. She was trying to meet the needs of 5 children, whereas Kandi was dealing with teenage daughters and was basically, again, feeling inadequate because nobody really needed her anymore. Her husband no longer met her needs because he had broken her trust. Her teenage daughters were out here being their own women and, again, did not need her at all for any sort of guidance in her eyes, even though teenage girls do need guidance from their mothers. But the whole thing is that Kandi, basically, again, because she had a bruised ego as related to that affair, was escalating her antisocial behavior from embezzlement, which was passive aggressive, in that passively she was at the job, but aggressively, again, looking to hurt the people at that job because she was hurting. What she wanted to do was then go out and have this affair to, again, sate her ego, and then also possibly, again, rebuild her self-confidence as related to having this affair with Emmett Corgan. And as she had this affair with Emmett Corgan, she was, again, getting her ego sated because at 40 years old, she was feeling like she could, again, go out here and still be considered to be attractive, considered to, again, feel like somebody was paying attention to her. And she also got a major boost to her ego as related to her natural hypergamy because Emmett Corgan was a successful attorney making lots of money and was very popular, so she was able to elevate her social status covertly by having this affair, and that was a major boost to her whole ego and her already shattered self-confidence. Her whole ego and self-confidence were basically, again, getting sated by being in this relationship with this 28-year-old man. Again, this was a major boost to her self-esteem as related to things because the whole marriage in and of itself was falling apart, and she thought she could again go out here and participate in that hypergamy and monkey branch over to Emmett Corgan, and Emmett Corgan would be the perfect guy that she could get, a complete simp she could control, a simp that she could control and be able to take advantage of. That's what Kandi was thinking as related to things, and the affair was going on, and the only person who really was starting to notice was Ashley Corrigan. Ashley Corrigan was basically thinking that things were suspect, and even that her children were thinking things were suspect because you had Emmett, who was working long hours and spending less time with the family, and again, they were suspecting things, and the whole thing is the things only started to come to a head as Emmett Corrigan was meeting Kandi for a rendezvous in that Walgreens parking lot on March 11, 2011. Now, on March 11, 2011, both Kandi and Emmett drove their vehicles into the Walgreens parking lot, and after they drove their vehicles into the Walgreens parking lot, they then went to a home that was being built and had a sexual encounter in that whole building. And after they had that sexual encounter, this is was where they wound up having a confrontation with Robert Hall, and had that confrontation because the daughter of Kandi Hall came into the Walgreens parking lot, noticed her mother's vehicle there, and as she noticed her mother's vehicle there, this is where she called up Robert Hall, and Robert Hall, on hearing that his wife was in that parking lot, looked to have a confrontation with the woman who, the man who she was having an affair with, and looked to have a confrontation with Emmett Corrigan. And as they had that confrontation, this is where Robert Hall basically acted on his emotions as related to his feelings, and acted impulsively and wound up shooting and killing Emmett Corrigan, and then after shooting and killing Emmett Corrigan, this is where he wound up arrested, and after he wound up getting arrested and put on trial, this is where, again, Kandi Hall threw both men under the bus. Kandi Hall, being the female predator, wound up throwing both men under the bus, throwing Emmett Corrigan under the bus as related to talking all about the affair, and then throwing Robert Hall under the bus as related to, again, things as related to her testimony. And again, her testimony was so inconsistent and it wasn't really seen as credible. And eventually, what happened at the end of this whole situation with Kandi Hall is that she wound up, again, not being charged with anything as related to that case of the death of Emmett Corgan. And eventually, Robert wound up going to prison. And as he wound up going to prison, she basically wound up getting arrested for embezzling money at that previous law firm that she worked at. And sadly, what happened is after she was released is the great tragedy that I have learned from guys getting emotional over women is that Kandi Hall went on to, again, be able to live another day, find two more simps to get involved with, which is what happens in these cases. And right now, Kandi Hall is possibly getting her back blown out, whereas Robert Hall is in prison. And this whole case basically proves a point that I know and I try to explain to people about. When it comes down to females at the job, again, when you're at the job, you don't get involved with the women at the job because it always ends in a tragedy. And when it ends in a tragedy, it can lead to you possibly, again, winding up at the least losing your job and your professional reputation, or it could lead to you winding up in a situation like this with a very emotional man who wants to take your life, a man who could wind up taking your life, or you wind up losing your freedom. And this is why you have to learn how to identify a female predator so that she won't prey on you. She won't prey on you and wind up making a situation where you get jammed up. A situation where you get jammed up because what happens is one man is dead, the other is in prison, and this woman is out here preying on the next two simps. That's what happens to guys who get involved with women like Kandi Hall, and a woman like Kandi Hall basically, again, is looking to prey on a man, because she hasn't dealt with emotional issues as related to her life. And since she hasn't dealt with those emotional issues, this woman in crisis puts two men in crisis. And that's why you have to learn how to identify the behavior of a woman like this so that she cannot put you in a situation where your life and freedom are in jeopardy. Now, the third and final person I'm going to be talking about in this historical couples in crisis video is Robert Hall. Now, Robert Hall was the husband of Kandi Hall, and he was a guy who basically was the one who participated in taking the life of Emmett Corrigan in this tragic love triangle. Now, Robert Hall basically wound up in this whole situation because he was one of these simps who hoped to be able to keep attached to a wife who basically he had no respect for anymore, and basically wanted to keep his world smooth as related to this marriage, a marriage that basically wound up falling completely apart because he had wound up falling out of love with his wife Kandi. Now, Rob wound up again becoming frustrated with his marriage. He had basically been a computer specialist for the Ada County Sheriff's Office, and as he was a computer specialist, he had created a middle-class lifestyle for his wife, who was working as a paralegal, and they took care of their teenage daughters. But the whole thing is that the marriage began to fall apart because Rob basically found the relationship he had with Kandi to be boring, but because he wanted to keep his world smooth and keep his two daughters happy, what he did was go out here and look not to divorce his wife because he wasn't happy in the marriage, but decided to walk out on the marriage because he said it was boring. But the reason why it was boring was because he never talked to his wife. No, instead of talking to his wife like many simps do, because simps basically, they are afraid to say things that upset a woman, because oftentimes a simp will submit to a woman in a relationship and stay in a relationship that's in a rut. And the reason why it's in a rut is because these men do not talk to their women. They do not connect with their women emotionally. No, when it comes down to a simp, once they fall into routine, they don't understand how to talk to people and let people know what they're feeling. No, what they do is go and simmer and boil in anger. And as they simmer and boil in anger, they participate in passive aggressive behaviors. And when it came down to Robert Hall, he participated in the passive aggressive behavior of looking to have an affair on his wife, and that affair basically started everything kicking off as related to all of the turmoil that basically came the way of Emmett Corrigan, because it's that affair that basically did a lot of damage to the self-esteem and self-confidence of Kandi Hall. It did damage to the self-esteem of Kandi Hall, and that's what happens when women get involved with simps, because again, a simp basically, again, does not know how to have a relationship to meet the emotional needs of a woman, and sadly, as a result of that trauma, Kandi went out here looking to again sate that self-esteem, build up her self-esteem and self-confidence by going out here and looking to have an affair of her own, looking to participate in a tit-for-tat with Robert Hall in an effort to again sate her ego and look to have that affair with Emmett Corgan, again a young naive guy who thought he was going to be able to have a little bit of fun with a more experienced woman on the side. But him having that affair with that woman on the side basically led to a whole tragic situation that took place inside of that Walgreens parking lot on March 11th, 2011. Now, as Kandi was having this affair and trying to sort out her feelings as related to rebuilding her self-confidence through unethical means, Robert Hall was one of these simps who was simmering and boiling in anger, and simmering and boiling in anger because of the bruises to his ego, that his wife would step out on him in a marriage that he said that because she was just boring, again, a woman who he said was boring, but the whole thing is he got a bruise to his ego when that boring woman was going out here causing drama for him, and that drama for him was him having to deal with this unfaithful wife, an unfaithful wife that he wound up stepping out on because he thought she was boring. And instead of him having the courage to go out here and just say the marriage is over because he had already participated in adultery, what he did was try to stay in this marriage because he wanted to have a smooth world. He wanted to have a smooth world with no active conflicts, problems, or obstacles like a divorce would have. No, he wanted to have that smooth world, and as he wanted to have that smooth world where his wife would again still be in this loveless marriage, he would be out here again having that smooth world. But the whole problem is that as they had that smooth world, eventually he wanted to again continue keeping a Kandi as an attachment, again, continue to have her in his life and maintain his routine as related to a relationship that had wound up falling completely apart, and a relationship that was basically over because Kandi was no longer looking to get her emotional needs met from Rob, and Rob wasn't interested in her at all, and both of them should have divorced, but sadly, this couple in crisis basically wound up getting involved, creating a situation with Emmett Corgan. And Emmett Corgan, as he got involved with this female predator, wound up in a situation where this simp eventually wound up becoming a psycho simp when his daughter called him after finding her mother's vehicle in the Walgreens parking lot. And this is where this simp wanted to go out here, and he went from being a simp to a power simp and a psycho simp. He went to become a psycho simp, looking to again look to go after the man who he was having an affair with his wife, not ever thinking that, well, if this woman is again having an affair, if she's cheating with a man, this is where again a critical thinking man says, no, I'm not going to get emotional and fight this other man. No, what I'm going to do is charge this woman to the game and keep it pushing because there's already was nothing there at this point. But no, this guy was caught up in his feelings, and again, caught up in his feelings regarding his bruised ego. And as he was caught up in his feelings regarding his bruised ego. He took a gun to that Walgreens parking lot, and as he took a gun to that Walgreens parking lot, he looked to confront Emmett Corrigan regarding the affair he had with his wife, and wound up shooting and killing Emmett Corrigan, and then wound up getting taken away and being arrested. And then after getting arrested and taken to prison, this is where he was again tried and convicted of his crimes and sentenced to 17 years in prison. And as he's been in prison for nearly a long time, he's still in the middle of this 17-year sentence. He's now in prison again while he's in prison. His ex-wife is getting her back blown out by another man, and he's getting his back blown out by Bubba, Tiny, Roscoe, Big Dave, Melvin, and Mr. Sprinkles. And all of those guys are basically again trading Robert Hall for Little Debbie snack cakes, ramen noodles, packets of Crystal Light lemonade, packets of Crystal Light tea, off-brand orange drink, off-brand grape drink, off-brand fruit punch, off-brand lemon lime drink, off-brand papaya drink, off-brand apple juice, off-brand Oreo cookies, off-brand duplex cookies, off-brand vanilla wafers, off-brand ginger snaps, Hunt snack pack puddings, Velveeta cheese, packets of sriracha sauce, packets of soy sauce, bacon bits, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle pies, all the items in the commissary, and he's basically again getting his back blown out by Bubba, Tiny, Roscoe, Big Dave, Melvin, and Mr. Sprinkles. And eventually, after they finish pounding and filling up all of those holes, Mr. Sprinkles is going to come in and glaze those holes with his special sauce, and glaze it with his special sauce, and then split this dude's cheeks open and call the guys from Cell Block D to see this guy's backside looking like the inside of a Louisiana crunch cake. And that's sadly what happens in these tragic situations when men like Robert Hall don't do any critical thinking. No, when guys like Robert Hall basically get caught up in their feelings over a woman, they don't think about more important intangibles like their dignity, their self-respect, and their freedom. This is what guys don't really think about, and this is where they wind up getting jammed up when they get caught up as in their emotions about a love triangle. Again, a love triangle where there was no love, because people who love each other don't do each other like this. Robert Hall clearly did not love his wife Kandi, and Kandi did not love him, but they did not have the courage to go out here and file for a divorce and break up their relationship. And because they didn't break up their relationship, they created a situation that basically wound up leading to the breaking of Emmett Corrigan, as him losing his life. And sadly, what happened in this whole situation is that Robert Hall, like many simps, again got in a situation with his feelings that cost him his freedom, and now he's in prison. And the same woman who he found was boring is now finding excitement as she preys on people, and again, she's still getting her back blown out, whereas Emmett Corrigan's family and his wife are basically still trying to pick the pieces of their life up. I mean, his wife Ashley, in this whole story, is the most positive thing. She wrote 3 books. She's still out here looking to, again, help out people and help out other survivors. And I really am happy to hear that she is, again, looking to do things very positively with her life and still trying to go out here and, again, break this cycle, a cycle that happens with many guys who, again, are simps, who again get involved with women who are predators. And when you get involved with a predatory woman like this, again, the smart man, when he hears that this woman is out here creeping on him and having another dude on the side, he navigates through his emotions and he charges that woman to the game. And lets the other man have her, because if she will cheat with him, she will cheat on him. And if she's a cheater, she's not a keeper. No, if she's a cheater, this is one that most dudes leave to the streets. And if Robert Hall had left her to the streets, he would be in a much better, he would have been having his freedom, been able to see his daughters grow up, possibly enjoy his grandchildren. But no, Robert Hall, because he got caught up in his emotions, is in prison right now, in prison right now while his wife is out here getting her back blown out by another man, and he's in a relationship with another man inside of that penitentiary. And this is the situation that can lead to a man winding up being in crisis if he doesn't know how to be able to work situations like this. Because when it comes to situations like this, a man has to be able to identify a female predator and step out of her way and be able to avoid this situation, because it's a situation that basically doesn't benefit either man and puts two men on a road to being men in crisis. Now, if you want to learn how to identify the behavior of a simp, you can learn how to identify the behavior of a simp and identify the behaviors of the type of women that prey on simps with my book, Stop Simping Why Men Don't Need Finance to Get Romance, on Amazon.com. And you can get that book and my other book, The Man Crisis, which goes in depth on identifying the behavior of beta males and the behavior that leads to them winding up in situations like this. And you can also pick up my book, The Woman Crisis, to learn how to identify what leads to women being motivated to participate in crimes like this. All three of these books are available in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com, and you can find them also at other online bookstores like Draft Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you want to see me do more videos in the Historical Couples in Crisis series, you can drop a donation of a minimum of $15 to the PayPal or the Cash App. And if I know something about that couple or do research on them, I will make that video for you. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Coming to paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, A Thorn in My Side. The man who rules the world takes on an agent from the CIA from the Black Boule in this action-packed all-new John Haynes series adventure. Pre-order your copy of John Haynes' A Thorn in My Side at Amazon.com and other online booksellers. Now available in paperback. From the author of the critically acclaimed book, The Man Crisis, comes The Woman Crisis. Learn why so many women have become lost in their quest to have it all in The Woman Crisis. Get your copy of The Woman Crisis in paperback at Amazon.com and online booksellers today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.